Look at every pharaoh statue you've ever seen, every Cleopatra painting, every gold sarcophagus mask. The black-rimmed eyes staring back at you were painted with a substance that was, chemically, a slow poison. And the Egyptians may have kept using it because it actually worked. This isn't a story about vanity. It's about a 5,000-year-old beauty ritual built on lead, a ritual worn by kings, priests, farmers, and children alike, and a ritual that modern chemists are still trying to fully explain. Rewind to the predynastic period, around 4000 BCE. Long before pyramids, before pharaohs even had crowns, Egyptians were already grinding minerals into powder on stone pallets. Archaeologists call these pallets some of the oldest Egyptian artifacts ever found. The black pigment came from galena, lead sulfide, a dense, silvery ore dug from the eastern desert and the Red Sea coast. Crushed to dust, it became the base of nearly every coal recipe in Egyptian history. Rich Egyptians got pure, finely ground galena. Poorer Egyptians made do with soot, or cruder substitutes scraped together from whatever was on hand. Even in the Bronze Age, your eyeliner told everyone exactly how much money you had. Green got its own mineral entirely. Malachite, a copper ore, ground into a vivid pigment the Egyptians called uju. Chemically, it has nothing to do with galena. They wore both anyway, black and green, layered around the same eye. Proof survives in stone. A limestone statue of Nessa, wife of the priest Sepa, carved around 2700 BCE, still shows traces of green malachite eyeliner today. 4,500 years later, her makeup outlasted her entire civilization. The recipes went further than crushed rock. Egyptians folded in ground pearl, emerald, ruby, silver and gold leaf, frankincense, saffron, and fennel. This was a poison cosmetic dressed up in genuine, absurd luxury. To turn powder into paste, they bound it with oil, gum, animal fat, milk, or plain water. The result was a smooth, dark paste that clung to the eyelid and didn't run in desert heat. By the New Kingdom, around 1550 BCE, coal storage became an art form. The Met Museum holds a coal tube in bright blue faience with gold mounts, inscribed for Jehutimose, High Priest of Thoth, greatest of the five. Inside sat a hematite applicator stick. The British Museum has one carved into the shape of a falcon. These weren't cheap trinkets. They were priestly heirlooms, built to survive the owner's death. And coal didn't stay above ground. Pots of it were sealed into tombs. Applicators buried alongside mummies. Apparently, the afterlife required good eyeliner too, protection and adornment expected to continue past death. Here's the part that matters. This wasn't a gendered ritual, and it wasn't occasional. Men wore it, women wore it, children wore it, across every social class, from the Delta farms to the royal court. Coal went on daily, without exception. Coal wasn't just spiritual, it was practical. The Nile Delta sun bounces off water, sand, and limestone with a glare that can blind you by noon. Black pigment under the eye absorbs that glare, the same trick modern athletes use with black eye black under stadium lights. But glare reduction doesn't explain the gold. Elite Egyptians kept their coal in alabaster jars, blue faience tubes rimmed in gold, some inscribed for high priests. The poor scraped soot into a clay pot. Same ritual, wildly different price tag. Makeup as a visible class marker. One surviving tube belonged to Jehutimose, High Priest of Thoth at Hermopolis, titled Greatest of the Five. Faience, gold mounts, a hematite applicator stick. Even the most senior clergy in Egypt wore eyeliner and wanted to be buried with the kit. Above status, above sunlight, one symbol dominates everything. The Wedjat, the Eye of Horus. Myth says Horus lost his left eye battling his uncle Seth for the throne of Egypt, and the eye was magically restored. It became the ultimate symbol of protection and healing. So painting coal around your eyes wasn't just imitating the god, it was invoking him, asking for the same restoration, the same defense against harm. Every morning application was a small act of religion, repeated on every face, every single day. That belief followed people into death. Tombs across Egypt were stocked with coal pots and applicator sticks, buried alongside the dead. The logic was simple. The afterlife demanded the same protection, the same adornment as life on the riverbank. And in the Nile Delta, that protection wasn't paranoia. It was survival math. Picture hot marshland, standing water, dense reed beds, a perfect incubator for flies and bacteria, and flies land on eyes constantly, carrying infection with them. That combination bred trachoma, a bacterial eye infection spread by flies and close contact. It has been documented in Egypt for over 3,000 years. It is, quite literally, older than most of the pharaohs whose faces we recognize. Here's the mechanism, and it's brutal. Repeated infection scars the inside of the eyelid. That scar tissue tightens and pulls the eyelashes inward. The lashes then scrape against the eyeball with every single blink. It's called trichiasis, a slow, mechanical countdown to blindness. Modern surveys prove how relentless this disease is even now. In one rural Nile Delta hamlet, over half of all preschool children had active trachoma. Among adults aged 25, 90% already carried significant scarring in their eyes. By the 1980s, trachoma was still blinding adults across the region and affecting more than half of all children in some Delta communities. This wasn't an ancient footnote. It was a live, ongoing crisis running for millennia, unbroken, in the exact landscape the pharaohs called home. So the Egyptians lived surrounded by a disease they couldn't name, spread by insects they couldn't stop, in a climate they couldn't escape. They just knew eyes went red, then scarred, then dark. And they had one substance they trusted to fight back. So they trusted coal. And in 2010, a French research team decided to find out why. They analyzed 52 coal containers, held at the Louvre, some over 3,000 years old, under modern lab instruments no pharaoh could have imagined. They found 4 lead compounds: galena, the black ore itself; cerussite, a natural lead carbonate; and 2 more, phosgenite and laurionite, lead chlorides that don't occur naturally anywhere in Egypt. That's the strange part. Someone had to make those too. Mix lead oxide, rock salt, and natron with water, and you get laurionite. The researchers think ancient Egyptians were running deliberate wet chemistry, 3,000 years before the word chemistry existed. That's a hypothesis, not a confirmed intention. Nobody left a lab notebook explaining why, but the recipe checks out, and here's where it gets genuinely interesting: what those lead salts might have done once they touched skin. The theory: lead salts trigger skin cells to release nitric oxide. That gas signals the immune system. More immune cells flow toward the eyelid. In lab dishes, that meant a stronger defense against bacteria, the same bacteria behind trachoma. Say it plainly, this comes from cell assays in a lab, not clinical trials on living patients. It is one study's finding, not settled medicine. Nobody is prescribing lead eyeliner, but it's a real, published, peer-reviewed clue. Because lead does not need a caveat when it comes to harm. It is a documented neurotoxin. Chronic exposure causes anemia, kidney damage, and lasting neurological harm. No controversy there, no asterisk required. And Egyptians applied coal daily, starting in infancy. Every single day, for an entire lifetime, meant an entire lifetime of lead absorption through the eyes, a slow accumulation with nowhere to go but deeper into the body. Children suffer worst. Developing brains are especially vulnerable to lead, so every Egyptian child who wore kohl from birth was, unknowingly, gambling, trading a possible defense against blindness for guaranteed, quiet, cumulative poisoning. They had no way to know any of this. No germ theory, no periodic table, no concept of a neurotoxin building up in soft tissue over decades. They only had one thing. It seemed to work, so they kept using it. That empirical bargain lasted 3,000 years, and the disease it was fighting outlived the pharaohs entirely. Trachoma stayed endemic in the Nile Delta for millennia, blinding generation after generation, long after the last coal pot was sealed in a tomb. Then, in November 2025, the World Health Organization declared Egypt had eliminated trachoma as a public health problem, the seventh country in the region to do it. A disease first recorded by the ancient Egyptians themselves, finally closed. Globally, trachoma still blinds or impairs vision in roughly 1.9 million people across 30 countries. The fight the pharaohs started with crushed lead ore is not over everywhere. It just finally ended in the place where it began. So here's the full picture. A cosmetic built from poison, worn for beauty, worn for gods, worn out of desperation against a disease nobody understood. And possibly, only possibly, it fought back a little on its own terms. No pharaoh ever knew the trade-off they were making. Science only started catching up in 2010. Every black-rimmed eye you've ever pictured on a mummy or a Cleopatra poster was, chemically, both a risk and a remedy. Subscribe for more history that got weirder the closer we looked.